Oh yeah, my good old SCAR L AEG. In over 5 years of use, it always has been a loyal companion, be it in dense woodland, muddy sandpit, or urban CQB territory. Besides being super reliable, this MK16 variant by Begadi is a very detailed replica of the FN Herstal SCAR L, which actually has been my favorite real steel rifle by looks since I began playing shooter games as a teenager. After such a long time of duty, I thought it was time to add one last feature I was missing more and more when I compare it to other AEGs I used, talking primarily about improving trigger response and sound characteristics, while still keeping it as reliable as possible. You would like to know what this final upgrade for the SCAR will be? In the next minutes, you will find out. Okay, if I've been so happy with my SCAR AEG all the time, why thinking about an upgrade now? Well, first, you know I'm a huge fan of tinkering on all of my Airsoft replicas and always try to find something to improve, which is not particularly easy on this certain replica, being very competitive even with a stock setup. Second, maybe you saw my older videos on improving AEG sound signatures and know I'm a huge fan of Precocking, a feature that the Begadi core system inside this MK16 does not have out of the box. This is why I asked my channel's main sponsoring partner Begadi to send me an ASCU Pro Plus by Airsoft Systems, a cycle control unit that's been established on the market for a long time, but I think deserves a lot more attention. And it supports Precocking. Let's get a closer look. The reason why I like the ASCU so much mainly is the philosophy behind it. There are many complex and feature-stuffed cycle control units out there, from Gate over Jeftron up to Perun, which can do a lot more than just preventing gear jams. But the ASCU is the only one I know that avoids optical sensors at all and relies completely on mechanical switches. The packaging tells us the manufacturers wanted to build a bulletproof system with maximum durability, which means also no Bluetooth connectivity for a smartphone app. They claim real M4 or AK rifles also usually don't connect via Bluetooth or USB. In my opinion, I prefer a reliably working SAEG over a completely digital setup with a lot of failure potential. Just ask my teammates, they can tell you about a lot of situations when my M4 systems with Gate Titan or Asta products sent out some crazy beeping sounds telling me Precocking didn't work, there's too much light or dirt on one of the sensors, or the sector gear could not be recognized. At some point I got rid of those issues and uninstalled every single Gate device I had been using before. Maybe it was my fault they did not work as I wished for, I don't know, but for me, the lack of reliability was just not acceptable anymore. However, back to the ASCU. The concept of back to the basics also is reflected in what you get inside the box. Next to the unit itself, there is one tool for wire management, one optional safety lever piece and one optional selector plate. That's it. Just straightforward. Let's take a closer look at the ASCU Pro Plus. As mentioned before, there are 3 micro switches on the single board unit, providing it with signals for programming and cycle detection. There is one on the top side for the sector gear, which is pushed down once per full rotation. A second one for the trigger, giving you a slight physical click with each shot. And a third one in the back, for detecting the selector plate's position. Now, while I prepare the SCAR L for installation, let me briefly tell you something about the features and programmable options of the ASCU. I listed the full set of features for you here, as it is shown on the Begadi website. Probably the most interesting for many of you would be the active brake function, the Precocking I mentioned before, and the high voltage support, up to 15 volts. The Pro Plus version also is completely brushless ready. So if you want to use it with a modern brushless motor, that's no problem. But Precocking would not work in this case. As I don't use a brushless motor in this build, I won't go in detail here, but the option to do so is given by the device. Some information for the international viewers of this video. Outside Germany, the ASCU also features 4 different fire modes, including semi, full auto and 3-round burst in different combinations. Here in Germany, you are not allowed to shoot burst or full auto above 0.5 joules of muzzle energy, so the 4 modes all do the same and allow semi-fire. If you are based in Germany and want to install the international version, make sure to do so only if your build is under the legal limits of 0.5 joules. You see, I disassembled the SCAR to the naked gearbox in the meantime. So let's see how the installation progress of the unit will work. After opening the gearbox, you immediately notice there is already a very similar unit built inside the MK16. And indeed, the Begadi core system shares the exact same shape and micro-switch positions as the ASCU. The only exception being the selector plate switch in the back, which is just missing. Nowadays, Begadi installs their core system to all new SAEGs in their shop. So basically, you get a light version of the ASCU in every single one of them. From what I can tell, the only missing feature is the ability to do programming via the selector plate, making the Begadi core unable to activate any precocking and choosing between fire modes, which actually is quite irrelevant here in Germany. Because the unit's shapes are absolutely identical, exchanging the 2 systems can be done without any modifications. According to Airsoft Systems, this is the case for many other V2 gearbox shells as well, not only for the Cyma shells used in this Begadi MK16. When installing the board to the shell, you want to keep an eye on the distance between the sector gear's bearing and the upper microswitch, which is supposed to be 5.5 mm, as you see in this picture taken from the ASCU's digital user manual. This is necessary to provide flawless cycle detection while not damaging the microswitch due to the distance to the sector gear being too small. At this point, I also would like to highlight the excellent wire and T-plug quality. Compared to what you get usually, they are very easy to work with and give you a good balance of flexibility and sturdiness. Very good choice by Airsoft Systems in my eyes. When installing the cables, it's very important to keep enough distance to the trigger and the safety lever. If needed, you can make use of the special tool that came with the unit to guide the wires around the trigger. The safety lever that came with the ASCU is a little thinner than regular ones, so it also helps with cable management. The only issue I'm having with this unit, and not for the first time actually, is about the selector plate. You see, it has to push down the micro switch in the right position, so the full auto mode is detected in the correct lever setting. To make it fit at all, I had to remove the metal piece of my original selector plate. The one that came with the ASCU is not compatible with the MK16. As you will see later, it still activates the microswitch too early, which results in some complications when it comes to programming, and for international players who want to use full auto mode. For me, however, it just works as it is. Before reassembling the gearbox, you can make advantage of the ASCU's mechanical concept. As there are no optical sensors to get dirty, you can use a lot of your preferred grease for the gears to help reducing noise, wear and tear. So, get a good amount of grease and get this thing lubed. Alright, the gearbox is ready. Now let's check the results of the upgrade. With precocking disabled, you see the piston remains in the maximum forward position before the shot, so the motor has to wind up the gears and the spring all the way before the BB is fired. The trigger response can feel a little delayed this way, especially when using standard or high torque gear sets. Concerning the sound, you will hear the gear noise first and then the piston head's impact on the cylinder head. Listen. To activate precocking on the ASCU now, you want to disconnect the battery and set the selector switch to semi. Remembering the not 100% matching selector plate, activating full auto too early, we have to find the closest possible position to safe, which still is not blocked by the safety lever, because the switch's semi position is recognized as full auto by the system. Now connect the battery and immediately pull the trigger. 3 vibrations from the motor indicate you are in precocking programming mode. Now keep the trigger pulled. The ASCU will calibrate the best precocking position for you. 1 more vibration after you release the trigger indicates precocking is active after the next shot. Here you see, as the piston head is already visible in the cylinder window, the spring is already partly compressed. How much it will be compressed depends on your individual setup, but the ASCU will always try to ensure reliable cycles, also when precocking is enabled. When shooting now, the trigger response feels a lot crisper. Also, the sound signature appears to be more compressed and sharp. Comparing the 2 amplitudes before and after shows, by activating precocking, the shooting sound does not get more quiet or shorter, but the time until the maximum volume of the shot is reached comes quicker. This is because the piston impact and the next turns of the gears overlap for a moment, which make it seem to sound a little sharper. In the outdoor recordings, this effect is even better to notice, because there is less echo than inside my studio. For longer periods of storing your replica, you probably would like to disable precocking again. You do so by going to precocking programming mode again. Remember, selector to close to safe but semi, connect the battery, pull the trigger immediately and wait for 3 vibrations. But then, instead of keeping the trigger pulled, just pull it once quickly. You will hear 1 more vibration. The piston is in the forward position again, and precocking is inactive from now on. This helps to reduce stress on the spring inside the gearbox, so its lifespan will benefit. I'd quickly like to show you what happens if I go to regular semi on the SCAR selector switch. The system thinks I'm in full auto because the selector plate is engaging the micro switch too early, so it leads me to fire mode programming instead, which only should happen when the selector is in full auto position. If you experience the same issue, you should be able to fix this by shorten the pedal of the selector plate a little, or, if possible, install the one that came with the ASCU instead of the original. In this fire mode programming, you hear a sequence of 1 beep, 2 beeps, 3 beeps and 4 beeps, representing the modes 1, 2, 3 and 4. Pulling the trigger after your preferred signal sets the replica to the respective mode, as long as you are using the international version of the ASCU Pro Plus. On my region-locked version, nothing happens. In this example you see, I chose fire mode 3, which is meant to be semi and 3-round burst. But the SCAR still shoots semi only, which should prevent any trouble with the German authorities for me, luckily. Long story short, what do I think about the ASCU Pro Plus by Airsoft Systems? Clear answer: it is my personal favorite cycle control unit for AEG airsoft replicas. The back to the basics approach, the mechanical switches instead of optical sensors, and the reliable precocking mode really sold me on this unit. Also the high quality wiring, the relatively low price point of around 65 euros at the Begadi webshop, and the easy installation are good reasons to decide in favor of the ASCU. Talking about the neutrals, those eventually could also be pros for you as well. For example, if you want to run a brushless motor, play outside Germany with different fire modes, or go crazy with high voltage batteries. The unit is capable of doing all of those things. I just listed them neutral because I do not use it this way and cannot comment on it any further. Well, and on the downside, there is only the selector plate mismatch for my SCAR L. Because the very same issue happened to me on my Lonex M4, I think I'm maybe not the only user to suffer from this. But all in all, it should be no problem to find an easy to do-it-yourself solution for this, as I mentioned before. Begadi is aware of this and clearly mentions this on the product page, so you also should know about this when making your buying decision. Especially because I did not find a hint about it in the user manual. And now, before you leave, would you like to tell me about your favorite cycle control system for AEGs? Do you think the ASCU is a great pick, or do you prefer a different solution? As always, I'd be glad to read about your experience in the comments, or to welcome you soon to another one of my Airsoft videos. So long, have a good one.